Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hello, everybody. My name's John. I'm a real alcoholic.
John.
Today has been a great day for me. I've just been full of so much gratitude today. It's my 16th birthday and AA birthday, and I'm here in San Diego, and everybody's been great. I want to thank Laura and the committee for giving me the opportunity to come here and carry the message. Laura's probably been one of the best connections I've ever had with a conference. She kept me up on everything. She didn't let me. Let's give her a hand. I went up to my room. I got so overwhelmed with gratitude. I went up to my room and I was able to think about some of the guys that sponsored me along the way. Some of y'all may know Lee White from Lee's Tapes and CDs. He was my first sponsor, and I worked with him for over 12 years. And working with a guy and him sponsoring, it don't work out real well. And then I got Ed M. A lot of y'all know Ed M. from Davenport Hour. He's passed away. He's deceased now, but Ed sponsored me up until he passed away, and now I have Dick Anderson as a sponsor. I'm breaking his anonymity. Dick A as a sponsor from Atlanta. And these guys poured so much into me. And man, they brought me from, you know what, I'm standing here tonight, and being here at the San Diego Roundup sure beats sitting in a jail cell. I tell everybody, I was doing life in prison on an installment plan. They used to let me come home on vacation. I see Don. I've known Don. I met Don as soon as I got out the penitentiary. Don is one of the first speakers I heard. And, it's these speaker meetings that really got me. When I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I could relate, and I would hear things, and I would relate to those things. I remember one time I was at a speaker meeting, and there was a guy out of Vegas. He was speaking, and he was talking about some rats. And he was talking about these scientists decided that they would do an experiment with the rats, and they decided to hook some electrodes up to the pleasure center of the rat's brain, the get high spot. And so they hooked those electrodes up, and they put a pedal in the cage. And the rat would hit the pedal, he would get high. So the rat went over and hit the pedal and realized what was happening, and the rat laid on the pedal. And they thought, well, he got to be dehydrated by now. We'll give him some water. They gave the rat some water, and he wouldn't even drink the water. And then they say he got to be hungry. We'll give him some cheese. And I'm quite sure it was gourmet cheese. And they put the cheese in the cage, and the rat looked at it and wouldn't eat it. And they said, oh, we know what we'll do. We'll put Miss Rat in the cage. And they put Miss Rat in the cage, and he looked at it like she didn't even exist. And he continued to lay on the paddle. And the rat laid on the paddle until he died. And they said, we'll do the same thing again, but right before he died, we'll cut the juice off. And they went through the same procedures, and the rat was laying on the paddle, and they cut the juice off. And the rat went over and he hit the pedal, and nothing happened. He hit the pedal again, and nothing happened. And the rat went over in the corner of the cage and balled up in a fetal position to die. And here's what the rat probably thought. Without the juice, what's the use? And I'm listening at that story, and I'm saying, I'm that rat. I'm that rat. April the 18th of 1998, I was laying in Brevard County Jail in a bunk, kind of like in a Vision for You to jump off place, realizing I can't live with it, and I can't live without it. And I just wanted the end to come. I've had all of me. At that point, I had all of me that I could stand. I watched the Discovery Channel, right? And one evening, I don't know why I'm getting off on these little animal stories, but I love animals. I love watching the Discovery Channel. And there were some gazelles, right? And there was an old lion laying in the bush. And about dusk dark, those gazelles, they began to get in this circle, and they would form a tight circle. And the old lion got real interested in that. And he watched them, and when the circle got really tight, the lion struck. And when he struck, he got one of the gazelles was to the edge. And I was sitting there thinking, and I'm saying, that's a lot like alcoholism. When the disease of alcoholism strike, it always get the one that hang around the edge. It never get the one that's in the center of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've never seen it get a guy that's fully engaged in service. I don't see it getting a lot of guys that taking meetings in the institutions or going into treatment centers or working with wet drunks. Those are not the guys I'm seeing it getting. I'm seeing it getting the guys that have said, okay, I don't need to go to as many meetings as I used to go to. And when this thing strike, it always get the ones around the edge. I'm going to tell one more animal story, then I'm going to go into my talk. Early in sobriety, I used to go to my sponsor house every day. And I would go over to my sponsor. One evening, I was over at his house, and we was watching the news. And there was a guy that had stuck his hand in a cage with a tiger, and the tiger had almost chewed his hand off. They had gave him a tiger to deliver at Vieira Zoo. And somewhere in, they don't give you a tiger and not give you instructions, right? And they probably told that guy to keep his hand clear of the cage. But on the way to the zoo, the guy stopped and he consumed alcohol. And after consuming some alcohol, he thought it was a good idea to stick his hand in that cage. And I'm looking at the news and I'm saying, I'm that guy. How many times have I had my hand in the tiger's mouth? I remember one time they let me out of jail and they told me I didn't have to go to prison if I would go the next day and do a PSI and do a clean urinalysis. And I'm saying, okay, I can do that. And I got home and that drink thing hit me. And I went and took a drink. And I got some of the other little buddies that I use along with my drinking. And the next morning I went up there to the PSI place. I did a dirty urine. And I guess my family seen me 5 years later. My sobriety date is April the 18th of 1998. I'm a member of the Central Group of Orlando. And if you're ever in Orlando, you want to have a real meeting with some real alcoholics, we sit right off of I-4 in Colonial and Broadway. So stop in and you can have a great meeting there. When I first got out of prison, I hadn't connected back with my family yet. And I told my sponsor, I say, man, it's Christmas time and I don't know what I'm going to do. I haven't connected back with my family. He said, that's okay, John. You can go down to Central tomorrow. You got plenty of family there. So the next morning he picked me up and he took me down to Central, and I got to Central, and they started a meeting about 10 o'clock. And I sat there about 11 o'clock. I was smelling the aroma from that food, and I'm saying, man, is this meeting going to ever end? Sure enough, about 12 o'clock, the meeting came to an end. And we all went in the back part of the meeting, and we began to fix plates. And, man, I got me a plate, and I got me some ham and some turkey and some macaroni and cheese. See, you got to realize that was good eating for me, because they don't feed you like that in DOC. And I asked him, I said, well, who do I pay for this? He said, John, you don't have to pay for this. This is for free. See, that was new to me, because where I had came from, nothing was for free. Everything had a price tag on it. And I used to go to a lot of meetings with my sponsor in the beginning. And this is the way he would introduce me to people. Meet John. He one of them bad kind of alcoholics. And I said, man, this guy going to have everybody thinking I'm the worst guy in the world. But then I sat around and I listened to some of y'all's stories, and I said, now these some bad alcoholics. I'm an alcoholic of a hopeless variety. And the reason why I say I'm an alcoholic of a hopeless variety, my family told me so. My friends told me so. Brevard County Sheriff Department told me so. The departments of correction told me so. Even the statistics was against me. The statistics say that 90% of the men get out of prison return within the first year. But since I've been in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I hadn't had the obsession to commit the type of crimes that land me in prison. It's been 16 years since I had to jump a fence. Now when I see a police officer, I don't see him as my enemy. I see him as an outstanding citizen doing a fine job in society to help keep the streets safe. Being an alcoholic of a hopeless variety, you have some pretty hopeless things to happen to you. I remember one time I had a bike, and I was riding the bike, and a police officer pulled up next to me, and he said, stop. And I was trying to stop the bike, but I was riding pretty fast, and the bike didn't have any brakes on it. So when I finally got the bike to stop, he jumped out the car and wrestled me to the ground, put handcuffs on me, and took me to jail. And the next day, they took me in front of the judge, and the judge said, read this gentleman's charges. He charged me with fleeing and looting a police officer on a bicycle. The judge kind of laughed it off and threw it out. There was another time that my license was suspended, but I still had an automobile. And I stayed about maybe 4 or 5 blocks from the store. And I said, there ain't no way the police gonna get me between here and the store. And I got in my car, and I must have got about a block and a half, the blue lights came on. And I knew my brother's date of birth and social security number. So the officer came up to the window and he said, let me see your driver's license. I said, I don't have any. He said, let me see your ID. I said, I don't have it. He said, well, give me your name and date of birth and social security number. And I instantly became Lars Hunter. So I gave him my brother's information, and he went back to the car and he ran my brother's name and all. And he came back and tapped on the window, and I said, yes, sir. He said, step out the car, Mr. Hunter. And I stepped out the car, and he began to put handcuffs on me. And I said, what are you doing? He said, you're $18,000 behind in child support. It took about 2 weeks for me to get that turned around to a driving without license. Now, you have to be an alcoholic of a hopeless variety to have those type of things. In 2005, I got a letter from GSO, and they asked me to speak at the World International Conference in Toronto. And, man, I got in my car, and I raced over to my sponsor house. I said, man, look at here what I got. I get to speak at the international conference. And he said, John, you know you're still on parole. You can't leave the country without letting your parole officer know. And I said, all right, man, I'll call him. He said, no, don't call him. Go down there. I jumped in the car, and I beelined to Mr. Kendall's office. I got in Mr. Kendall's office, and I said, Mr. Kendall, I want you to read this. Mr. Kendall read that letter, and he looked up at me. He said, you got to be out of your mind. You think I'm letting you leave the country. I jumped in my car and back to my sponsor house. My sponsor said, John, write the judge a letter. I wrote the judge a letter, and while asking him about going to Canada, I also told him why I shouldn't be on parole anymore. And sure enough, the judge answered my letter, and he gave me a court date. And I went in the courtroom, and he called me up, and they began to talk about going into Canada. And I told him that I didn't think that I should be on. I didn't want to talk about Canada first. I wanted to talk about getting off parole first. And I began to tell him why I shouldn't be on parole. He said, I don't want to hear that. And you know, me being the fine alcoholic that I am, I'm not going to stop at that. So I continued to try to tell him why I shouldn't be on parole. He said, didn't I tell you I don't want to hear that? But you can go to that AA thing. So 2005, I did get to go out of the country and go to Toronto. And I can remember being on the 22nd floor of the Intercontinental Hotel. And I was looking out over the city. And as far as I could see, all I could see was name badges saying I am responsible. And I was pretty new then. And I began to tear up because I knew that that was the handwriting of God. That many alcoholics in one place and there ain't even one fight. God had to be in the midst of that crowd. I was born in a little town called Statesboro, Georgia. My father was a sharecropper. My mother was a Southern Baptist. My mother taught me everything any good mother would teach her child. My mom made me go to Sunday school on Sunday mornings. She made me go to church on Sunday evenings. My mom even made me go to Bible study. My mom sat me down and she taught me the golden rules. She told me, baby, if you're going to make it in this world, you're going to have to learn to do unto others as you would have them to do unto you. But about the age of 9, something happened. My mom passed away. And when my mom passed away, all of that passed away. My father was a chronic alcoholic. There was times I went to school on a wet, cold ground with holes in the bottom of my shoes. There was times I went to bed hungry at night. There was times I went to school and my clothes wasn't real good and kids would make fun of me and low self-esteem sat in right away. I would try to do things to get the teacher's approval and that didn't even work. I had older sisters and brothers and I just knew if I made it to their home that everything was going to be all right. And I would get to their home and they would have little stuff to say to put me down. So I felt inferior to, less than everything and everybody at a real young age. I remember hearing my father come up in his car, and his car horn would be out, he would be outside and he would be blowing his car horn. And I knew that my father was out there drunk. And I always had a decision to make. Was I going to go out and help my father and be embarrassed in front of my friends, or was I just going to leave him out there? And my decision was always this, that I was going to help my father no matter what. And I would go out and get my father, and I could hear the kids say, look at John. He got to drag his drunk dad in the house again. See, I felt that those kids were better than me because I never seen them drag their father in the house. I remember standing in my bedroom window and kids would be outside wrestling around in the yard with their fathers or playing catch football or just having a good time with the family. And I would instantly blame God. And I would say, what kind of God would take a 9-year-old boy's mother? But standing at this podium tonight, I have to let God off the hook because God left me with a father that wasn't willing to step up to the plate. I got interested in girls around 14. What do you do when you get interested in girls? You go to those little teen centers. And I said, man, I'm going to dance with me some of these girls tonight. Man, I get over to that teen center and I opened the door at that teen center, man, and I could smell the perfume and they would all have on their pretty dresses and looking good. I said, man, I'm going to dance with me one of them tonight. And one song will come on and go off. Then I said the next song, and then I look out on the floor, and there'll be some guy out there with a pair of Chuck Taylors and Levi's. How many of y'all know about Chuck Taylors and Levi's? That's old school. And this guy would have all the right moves, man, and there would be a circle of girls around the guy, and man, he'd be having a good time. And I'd say in my mind, that's what it is. It's in the Chuck Taylors and Levi's. So I'd work and save my money up, and I'm back off to the dance with my Chuck Taylors and Levi's. How many of y'all know I was a guy standing up against the wall with a pair of Chuck Taylors and Levi's on? See, there was something on the inside of me that would not let me respond to things on the outside. My father came up with the idea that I needed to go to Georgia for the summer and visit my aunt and uncle. I was living in Vero Beach, Florida at that time, so I went to Georgia that summer, and my aunt and uncle had 2 boys a little bit older than me. One Saturday night, they asked me, did I want to go to the dance? And I told them, yeah, I go to the dance. On the way to the dance, they stopped at this little house, and they knocked on the door, and an elderly man came to the door. And they asked him, will he sell them a pint of moonshine? He went back and he shut the door and went back in. In a few minutes, he came back with a pint of moonshine and an MD 2020 bottle. If any of y'all know about bootlegging, you know that combination. So he gave us a pint of moonshine. We got in the truck. One brother took a swallow and passed it to me. I said, I don't want that. He gave it to the other brother. He took a drink, and we went on to the little club. When we got there, the other brother took a swallow, and he passed it to me. I said, I don't want that. He said, man, take a drink of this. It'll make you feel good. And I took a big swallow. You know, if moonshine had been some people's first drink, they'd have spit it out. But man, I took me a big swallow, and I can remember it just like it was yesterday. Dr. Silkworth said, you shall remember. Guess what? I love carrot cake, but I don't remember my first slice. But I can remember that first drink of moonshine. There was a warm, burning feeling that went down on the inside of me. And when it hit the pits of my stomach, it felt like my stomach expanded. Felt like my head exploded. Felt like I was 10 feet tall, bulletproof, and instantly good looking. Remember when I said I was shy about dancing with girls? Man, I danced with all of them that night. I had it going on. And guess what? There was no low self-esteem that night. Alcohol allowed me to visit from a place from which I had never been able to visit from before. See, when I first started drinking, alcohol wasn't my problem. Alcohol was my answer. And it was the only answer I ever had in my life that worked until I made it here to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what happened is that one day, the first answer I found, it turned on me. I remember when I got back home, I began to hang out with my buddies, and my buddies had been doing a little drinking too. And we would get together and put our money together, and we would buy alcohol and a few other things. Now, I may say something about drugs a time or two in my talk, and it's not because I belong in Narcotics Anonymous. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm at home. Right now, if you come up here and put a pile of crack on this podium, I'll call the police on you. Right? But if you give me a drink of whiskey, I'll kill you about that pile of crack. See, when I drink alcohol, I become open to everything. And there was times we wouldn't have money. And I used to wear a black leather jacket. And I can put 3/5 of MD 2020 in my bike, and you never see it. So instantly, I began to steal for alcohol. There would be times me and my friends would be out at night, and they said, man, we got to go home. We got to go to school tomorrow. And I tell them to drop me off, and I'd continue to drink. How many of y'all know you can't stay in school long drinking MD 2020? It wasn't long before I was expelled. And my father and sister told me, we think you ought to go to Job Corps. And I agreed with them. They said, you need some type of education. I said, okay, I'll go. I went to Job Corps. I did good for about 2 weeks. After I started drinking, I couldn't do good for over 2 weeks to save my life. I did good for about 2 weeks, and they let me out. I was in Pine Knot, Kentucky. They let me go over to Knoxville, Tennessee. And there was a guy on the bus with me. He said, John, this bus will ride a half a gallon of liquor. And I said, man, stop playing. He said, you know I don't play. When we got to Knoxville, Tennessee, we went and got a half a gallon of Bacardi rum. There was a tire flipped up under that bus. We put that half a gallon of rum in that tire, and when we got back to the Job Corps Center, it was there. How many of y'all know, after a couple trips like that, how many of y'all know you can't stay in Job Corps drinking rum? They run you off too. But on my way back home, I had made my mind up that I was going to live the way I wanted to live. I wasn't afraid of my father anymore. I wasn't afraid of my sisters and brothers anymore. Alcohol had gave me all the courage I need, and I felt like I was ready for the world. When I got back home, I began to hang out with the drug dealers. I began to sell a little drugs. I was able to buy a few toys. I was able to dress real nice. Most of all, I was able to drink the way I wanted to drink. Tom College, Scotch College, Hennessy, Valentine. I had a lot of fun drinking for a long time, and my story is different than a lot of people's stories. A lot of people say that alcohol quit working for them. Alcohol never quit working for me. My first drink was just like my last drink. Alcohol did what it was supposed to do, but guess what? I couldn't deal with the consequences anymore. Somewhere in life, I had crossed an invisible line, a place of no return. The police began to get mad with me. They began to put me in jail for periods of time. And they would put me in jail, and after about 30 days, my head would clear up. And I said, when I get out of jail, it's going to be different this time. I'm going to go back to school and get me some type of education. I'm going to get me an automobile. I'm going to get me a girlfriend. I'm going to do the right thing. And you know what? The day would come, they would let me out of jail. And I get just about a mile from that bus stop. And the disease of alcoholism will begin to speak to me. And it always sounded like this. It's been a long time since you had a beer. One won't hurt. And I get off that bus with the mindset of having one beer, and I'm going to go home to my family. And guess what? I'll be off and running till the next time. There was times they would put me in prison for periods of time. While I would be in prison, I would always go to church and stuff. And I would write my family and tell them, I'm a religious man now. I walk after the things of God.
Welcome back to the Encore Audio YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. Well, tonight I've got some Joe and Charlie here. I found these cassette sets that I've had for some time, and I've already transferred them and digitized them to MP3s, and now I'm going to make MP4s and upload them. So let me know if you like Joe and Charlie. If you want to hear more, I have a few more sets in the back in the wings, and I want you to have a good day if you want to.
It's going to be different when I get home. I mean business. And my family would believe me. Guess what? I believe me. And if they would have gave me a lie detector test, I would have passed it because I meant business. There was only one thing wrong. When they let me out of prison, they always let me out of prison. And I'd be off and running. And sometime it'd be a couple of weeks before my family would see me. And my family would see me and they say, you know, you're the biggest liar we know. But what my family didn't understand, that I was doing the best that the disease of alcoholism would allow me to do. There were times when my appearance began to fail. And my family would come up on the street corner. And they would look at me, and I could see that shame and pain in their faces. And they would say, why don't you just come go home with us? If it ain't but for one day, why don't you give yourself a break? And I look at them, man, and I see that pain in their faces. And I say to myself, I got to quit hurting them like this. And I get in that car, man, and I be riding with them. And I look up in the mirror, and I could still see that pain in their faces. I said, this is going to change. I'm going to stop hurting them like this. They stop somewhere and buy me some clothes to put on and take me into their homes and allow me to have a hot shower and clean clothes to put on and fix me a nice meal and give me a clean bed to sleep in. And I'd walk around there for a couple of days and I say, I'm constantly thinking, I got to stop hurting my family like this. About the third day, I start getting irritable and discontent. And I just needed a beer to take the edge off. Now, I didn't say I wanted a beer. I said I needed a beer. Somebody here know what I'm talking about, because about the third day, my mind would begin to scream. And I knew if I got me a drink of alcohol that I would be okay. And I would go to the corner store with the mindset of drinking me a tall boy and going bike. And I would drink that tall boy and I would be off and running. Remember, I said, that's the family I love. That's the family I swore on the oath that I wouldn't hurt. But I couldn't stop drinking. You know what? I would lay my life down for my family. If anybody tried to hurt my family, I believe I would step in and intervene if it cost my life to protect them. But you give me a drink of alcohol, and I'll be the first person to hurt them. I'm powerless over alcohol, and I have no defense against the first drink. There was I met this young lady in Melbourne. And she told me, she said, you know, I know what's wrong with you. It's Melbourne got you drinking and drugging the way you're doing. We need to move to Atlanta. And I agreed with her. And she called her mother. And her mother got us an apartment. Her mom got her a job. Her stepfather got me a job. We went to Atlanta. I did good for about 2 weeks. How many of y'all know they sell whiskey in Atlanta too? See, you can't outrun this thing. You take it everywhere you go. And I broke those people's hearts. While I was in Atlanta, I was working at a store called Video Ingram. And I met this guy, and he had a toy poodle. And this toy poodle was bad about chewing electrical cords. And one night, he forgot to unplug a lamp. And in the midst of that night, that poodle got a hold of that lamp cord. And he said, you can hear him holler all over the house. I said, yeah. He said, "Now, Joe, when I go home, I pick the wire up and wave at him." I said, "Well, what do we do?" He said, "Man, that dog holler all over again." See, that poodle had more sense than me. That poodle never had the obsession to chew another electrical cord. But you take me. Alcohol can beat me up one side, tear me down the other side, cause me to lose the best relationship I ever had, put more space between me and my family than there ever been, put me deeper in prison than I ever been. And the day they let me out, you wave a ball at me, I'll do it again. I'll do it again. Getting close to the end, I was on the street corners and my sister came up there and she had an insurance policy with tears in her eyes. And she said, "I need you to sign this insurance policy because I'm going to need something to bury you with because you can't live long the way you're going out here." My sister had heard about when drug dealers would be making their sales, I would run up and snatch the customer's jewelry and sometime money and run. And sometimes the drug dealers would say, "Man, we should get together and just give him something, man, and get him off the corner, man. He's bad for business." Now you in a world of trouble when drug dealers don't even want you around.
To obtain additional copies, receive a free catalog of AA and Al-Anon talks, or to find out about our tape and CD of the Month Club, call Encore Audio Archives at 1-800-878-1308 or visit our website at www.12steptapes.com.
I remember getting near the end. I used to walk late at night, and I could feel all the guilt, the shame, and the pain. And sometimes I'd have pocket full of money, a bottle of booze, and some of my other little things that I like to have along with my booze. And I remember I started praying a prayer, and I started asking God if I'm going to ever change, He's going to have to help me. And I think about 3 weeks into that prayer, I was out to my family house, and I woke up about 7 o'clock that morning, and the house was surrounded by Brevard County Sheriff Department. So I want to tell y'all, be careful what you pray for. Because that morning I met a power greater than myself. And they dragged me out my family house and all their neighbors was out there. And I'm looking back at my family and I can see all that shame and pain again. They put me in the back of the police car and I'm trying to tell my family out the back window that I love them. See, April the 18th of 1998, I thought it was the end for me. I had no idea that it was the beginning of a brand new life. They took me to jail, and they kept me in jail for about 60 days, and a public defender came to see me. And the public defender said, "Mr. Hunter, they got you to the right this time. This is what the state attorney asking for. He asking for 30 years on each charge, and he want to run them consecutive. What they want is 60 years. And I say, 60 years? And he said, yeah. And he got up and started walking away. And I tried to call the public defender back, and he just kind of did like this and like, "Man, there ain't much I can do to help you." So about another 30 days went by. They took me to court. And I was in the holding cell, and I seen the state attorney and the public defender come out the courtroom at the same time. And I'm thinking, what have this guy done? Have he buddied up with the state attorney? And when they got over to my cell, the state attorney opened my chute. And he got down and he said, "Mr. Hunter, this is what I'm willing to do." He said, "I got you to the right this time." He said, "If you plea out the 30 years, I'll run the other 30 years concurrent, and all you have to serve is the 30-year sentence." And the state attorney got up and walked away. And then my public defender got bent over to the chute and said, "I think it's a good deal. You ought to take it." And then I bent over to the chute and told him, "You take it." They took me in front of the judge. And the judge asked me, he said, "Mr. Hunter, how do you plea?" And I said, "Your Honor, I plead to the mercy of the court." And the state attorney said, hold up a minute, Your Honor, I want to show you something." And he pulled a video, TV up with a video connected to it. And he stuck the video in the player, and it was me as plain as day, just like you're looking at me now. And the judge said, "Mr. Hunter, with your prior record and this video, I'll probably go along with the state." And I said, "Your Honor, if I get this type of time today, I'll have to get it from you. I won't accept it from the state." He hit the table. Bam, recess, get him out of here. They took me back to the holding cell. And when I was in that holding cell, I got on my knees and I began to pray to God. And I asked God, if I get 30 to 60 years today, let it be your will and not theirs. An hour went by. They came and took me back in front of the judge. The judge told my public defender to bring the habitual papers up to the bench. My public defender got the habitual papers and went up. He told the state attorney to bring the habitual papers. The state attorney went up with the habitual papers. But the judge was flipping through his folder, and he said, I can't find them. And my public defender said, Your Honor, would you state that a little clearer for the record? He said, I can't find them, but I'm going to give Mr. Hunter every day by law that I could give him in the Department of Correction. And by law, all he could give me was 5 years in the Department of Correction, followed by 4 years probation. If the habitual papers isn't in the judge's folder 30 days prior to sentencing a man, he can't sentence him as a habitual criminal. See, there's not a second guess in my mind why I'm here in San Diego tonight. I'm here tonight because a loving God looked down upon me. And showed grace and mercy. If I'd have got what I deserved, I told y'all about the video, you'd have a different speaker up here tonight. Shortly after that, they hauled me off to prison. When I was in prison, I said the same prayer for 4 years and 3 months. I used to be walking around the recreational yard, and I used to look up at that razor wire, and I used to say, God, you didn't make me to be caged up like a wild animal. And I'm not asking you to get me out of here. What I'm asking you, God, is to help me to be a blessing to my family when I get out of here and not a hindrance, and to help me be a better man. I was in prison for about 6 months to a year, and I was forced into a TIR program. When I was forced into the TIR program, that's when I was introduced to the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had a counselor by the name of Mr. Elkins, and one morning Mr. Elkins called me out. It was a setting like this, but not even a third as big. Mr. Elkins called me out of that group, and he asked me, he said, John, do you think you're powerless over alcohol in your life or unmanageable? I said, Mr. Elkins, you've had plenty of one-on-ones with me. Why are you calling me out in front of this group? He said, I'm not calling you out in front of this group, convict. I asked you a question. And then he said, approach my desk. I approached Mr. Elkins' desk. He shoved the book in my hand, and he said, I challenge you to read this. And I took the book, and I went and sat back down. And that night, when I got on the compound, during count time, I opened the book, and I began to read it. I must have read about 2 or 3 pages, and it asked me a question. It asked me, had I ever been defeated by alcohol? And God gave me a moment of clarity. I can remember the times when I promised my daughter I was going to take her to Disney, but the night before I drank and drugged all my money up. I can remember the times when I had an eviction notice, but due to drugs and alcohol, I was evicted. I didn't even pay my rent. I can remember the times when I used to like to fish, but because of my alcoholism, I didn't own a reeling rod or any tackle anymore. I could remember the time when a woman and 2 little kids was living in an apartment with me, and with everything in me, I was going to pay that light bill the next morning. But that drink thing hit me, and I just wanted one to take the edge off. Y'all know the rest of the story. The woman and the little kids had to live with me under candlelight. I went back in front of Mr. Elkins the next morning, and he could see that something was wrong with me. And he took me away from the rest of the guys and took me in his office. And when he closed the door, he said, what's wrong, John? And I began to cry. He said, John, what's wrong? And I told him that alcohol had became my master, and I was its slave. He said, John, I've been hearing it come out your mouth. He said, but this morning I hear it coming from your heart. Now you got a place to start. Mr. Elkins worked the steps with me the best he could. Shortly after that, I was transferred to Tomoka Correction Institution. And when I got to Tomoka, 2 guys from the Rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous used to bring a meeting in every Monday. And if anybody ever here are taking meetings in the prisons, you do get one every now and then. I'm here tonight because 2 guys brought a meeting into a Department of Correction. Upon release from prison, I signed myself up into a recovery house for another year. And when I got out of prison, I went to that recovery house that Tuesday. They always let you out of prison on a Tuesday in the state of Florida. I never forget that. Some things you don't forget. I went to the recovery house, and I called my family that afternoon, and my family say, we thought you was getting out. And I say, I'm out. They said, where are you? I said, I signed myself up in a halfway house for another year. And my family said, you know what? You the biggest fool we know. You done did 4 years in prison. Now you're going to lock yourself up for another year? But what my family couldn't see was my fear. It had been since the age of 14 that I had been sober in society. And see, I had a divine intervention. That's all it was. I had a mindset that I was going to win this time, no matter what. If I had to stay in that recovery house for 2 years, I was willing to do it because I wanted to win this time. And I knew what was going to happen if I go home. See, there's a part of me that loved that madness out there. And if I go out there, I'll go out there and stay. I'm the type of guy that has to do what's necessary in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous in order to maintain his sobriety. I'm a real alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic of a hopeless variety. I have to do what's necessary here. And in the midst of being at the recovery house, I don't think this guy would mind me using his name. Lee White used to bring a big book study into that recovery house. And one night, instead of doing the big book study, he told his story. And when he told his story, I heard my story. And I asked him, I said, would you show me how to stay sober? He said, I can't show you how to stay sober, but I can show you what they showed me. He sat me down and we talked about steps 1, 2, and 3. And he took his big book and he opened it up to page 98, the second paragraph, and it said, burn this ideal into the conscience of every man, that he could get sober in spite of anyone under these conditions, that he trusts God and clean house. He said, John, I see that you trust God. Now it's time that you clean house. He had a little Cherokee Jeep. He took me in that Jeep and he took me across the street to the store. He bought me a notebook tablet and an ink pen. And he brought me back and he sat me at that table and he drew some lines. He drew some lines on that tablet. And he told me in this first column right here, I want you to put down the name of all the people you hate. The resentment list. I said, man, this stuff is easy. Don't you know I remember them all? The next week he came back, he said, I want you to tell me why you mad at them, the cause. And I said, man, I remember what every one of them done to me. But the third week he flipped the script on me. He said, I want you to pray for him. I said, what? He said, yeah, I want you to pray for him. And he said, I want you to pray for them for the next 2 weeks. And I want you to ask God to give them whatever you would ask God for yourself. And I said, man, he said, John, if you want to get sober, you better mean business. I said, okay, I'll do it. And I prayed to them. I asked God to let the kids be college graduates, give them a job from which they can support their family, give them the car of their dreams. And some of them I couldn't pray for. And I asked God, I said, God, if you want me to love that one, you love him through me and make this love perfect. And he came back and he said, about a couple of weeks he came back and he said, John, how you been doing with that praying? I said, I've been doing real good with the praying. All but 2 people I can't get past. And he said, John, what 2 people is that? I said, it's my father who treated me so poorly as a child. And that girl who shot me in my back with that rifle and caused me to lose my right lung. I can't get past that. He said, John, have a seat. And I sat down. And he said, John, I want you to think of 3 of the worst things you ever did. And I sat there and thought of it. And he said, John, do you think you should be forgiven? I said, yes, I think I should be forgiven. He said, John, I think you should be forgiven too. He said, the reason why you did what you did were because you were spiritually sick. He said the reason why your father and that girl did what they did to you were because they were spiritually sick. Here in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, we don't hate spiritually sick people. We pray for them. See, it was good news to me that my father was spiritually sick. That meant that my father wasn't the type of man that would send his 9-year-old son out on a wet, cold ground with holes in the bottom of his shoes. That meant that my father wasn't the type of man that would send me to bed hungry at night. That meant that my father wasn't the type of man that would abandon me in the midst of a crisis. That meant that my father was caught in the grip of an obsession, and no human power could have relieved him of that. See, all those years, I was dying on the inside, and nobody knew it but me. For me, a resentment is like this. A resentment for me is like taking this glass, filling it up with poison, and drinking it, and waiting for you all to die. Isn't that something? Resentment is our #1 offender. We must rid ourselves of resentment or it kills us. And mine was killing me. You know, I like to listen to a little R&B and a little gospel. And I got this artist I like to listen to named Betty Wright. And Betty Wright sings a song called No Pain, No Gain. And I've heard that song God knows how many times, but one morning I was listening to that song, and she say, if you can receive the gift to forgive, a longer and a better life you will live. And I said, wait a minute, that sounds like AA talk. So I backed it up a little bit, and sure enough, she said it again. If you can receive the gift to forgive, a longer and a better life you will live. No pain, no gain. And I said, wait a minute. Now, what is she saying? Is she saying, when I forgive you, that I get set free? Huh? See, this is what happened. When you hate a person, that's taking. When you pray for a person, that's giving. I never seen anyone give spiritually and not receive. But the strongest thing she said in that was, if you can receive, you mean that I don't have the ability to forgive? No, forgiveness don't come from me. Forgiveness come through me. When I get ready to set one of God's kids free, isn't that something? This is the best deal on the block. I remember giving my sponsor my 5th step, and I didn't hold nothing back. I remember that everybody told me that half measures avail us nothing, and I was straight with my sponsor. Now, I don't know if they tell this lie in San Diego, but I hear this lie quite a bit in Florida. But I'm going to speak about it. Sometime, and if any newcomers here and anybody been telling you this lie, I don't want you to believe it. I hear people tell newcomers sometime, if you put half in, you're going to get half out. No, I got news for you. If you put half in, you ain't going to get nothing out. Because half measures avail us nothing. If you want what we got, you got to do what we did. I remember my sponsors getting on step 6. My sponsor said, John, are you ready to have God remove all your character defects? I said, yeah. He said, what are they? I said, huh? he said, I know what they are. Him being the fine sponsor that he is, when I was giving him my 5th step, he was jotting down my defects. He told me, you're a liar, you're a deadbeat dad, you're a thief, you use women for your own selfish reasons. There were some other things he told me. And he said, but if you're willing to turn that loose, God will take it. And then he pointed at me. And he said, I believe the dirtiest, rottenest thing you ever did, you did it to survive, based upon the circumstances that was in your life. And if you turn this stuff loose, God will take it. Well, he set me free. Everybody else told me that I needed to die and burn in hell for my actions, and some of them tried to send me there. There was a little boy named Johnny. I'm going to say, now, if the average AA member, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't want nobody to judge me about what I'm finna say. And I love the old timers. But you ask the average old timer, how you doing with your character defects and shortcomings? Say, oh, past that. I don't know how in the world he got past them defects of character. There was a little boy named Johnny. And Johnny was good at fixing things. And Johnny got this lawnmower and he fixed it and he painted it red. And that Sunday, this old Baptist preacher was coming through there. And he said, Johnny, what you want for that lawnmower? He said, $20. He said, why you want so much for it? He said, that's just the price, Rev. So the preacher went over there and started jerking the string. He said, Johnny, was this thing crank? He said, yes, sir. The preacher kept jerking it. He said, Johnny, I thought you told me this thing will crank. He said, it will, but there's a trick to it. He said, what's the trick? He said, you got to kick it, spit on it, and curse it. And the preacher said, Johnny, I'm a minister. I don't curse. I probably couldn't curse if I wanted to. Johnny told him, if you jerk that string a few more times, it'll all come back. And see, that's the same thing with us. If your character defects ain't been showing up, probably because nobody ain't been jerking your string. But we have some tools. We have some tools to keep that thing leveled out. I remember I was sitting down and I was writing my 8-step list out. And my sponsor said, John, what are you doing? I said, I'm writing out my 8-step. And he said, no, you're not. I said, what do you mean? He said, do you remember when I asked you when you was doing the 4th step, was you selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate with some of those people? I said, yeah, I remember you asked me that. He said, that's your amend list you can add to it. I said, what? Now, if I knew that was going to be my amend list, I wouldn't have been selfish, dishonest, and inconsiderate with some of them. And he started with the one that I didn't really want to make an amend with, and it was my daughter's mother. I didn't feel like I owed her anything. She had took my parental rights for 9 years. And that's the first one he did. And he said, John, you got to make this amend. And he sat me down. He said, John, this ain't about them anymore. This is about you cleaning your side of the street so you can be a maximum service to God and others. He said, you got to do this. I said, I'll do it. He said, okay, I want you to write your daughter's mother a letter. And kind of make it for your daughter too. I said, man, I don't want to write this letter. These people think I'm the worst person in the world. You're going to open up a can of worms making me write this letter. He said, John, just go write the letter. So I went and wrote the letter, and I took it back to my sponsor. And he said, John, he read the letter. He said, John, we're going to mail this letter. I said, man, I don't think you heard me when I told you you're going to open up a can of worms by making me get in contact with these people. He said, John, let's pray over the letter. We prayed over the letter. He took me to the post office. We mailed the letter. In a week time, I got a phone call, and it was my daughter. And my daughter said she wanted me to be a part of her life and that she wanted to build a relationship with me. What if I had not did this? She's expensive, but she's back. And because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was able, starting in my daughter's 11th year, my daughter's 11th year of school, I was able to be a father for her in the 11th and 12th grade, and I was able to help support her all the way through college. Alcoholics Anonymous has given me so many gifts, so many. I remember I went to Melbourne, Florida, and I was riding through Melbourne, and this is an amend I had forgot all about. I didn't even put it on paper. And I was riding through my old neighborhood, and I seen this store that I used to steal wine out of. But I used to try to fight the guy when he would catch me, so the guy had barred me off the premises. And I said, man, I owe that guy an amend, but he barred me off the premises. And I kept driving, and it became the biggest thing on my mind. So I knew what that was. I turned my car around. I went back. I parked in front of his store, and I opened the door of his store. When I opened the door, that guy pointed at me and said, you're a different man. And then he repeated himself. And I walked in the store, and I told him I did you wrong, and I'm here to make it right. He said, don't worry about it. And I explained to him that I belong to a fellowship, and one of the requirements was that I clean up the records from my past. And he pointed at me again, and he said, if you made it right with God, you've already made it right with me. Again, God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And, I work step 10. I do it every evening. Go over and check my inventory and see where I've been wrong. And up on awakening every morning, 11th step, I ask God to divorce me from self-pity, self-seeking, and dishonesty. Give me intuitive thinking for the next 24 hours. And I always pray for somebody else and not my own selfish end. And I do a love meditation every morning. And I do my 12th step work at the recovery house in Central Florida. You know, the treatment center I got out of and went from prison and went to, I'm still connected with that treatment center. And they don't let the guys go out much. And I'm able to sponsor some of those guys in their first year of sobriety until they can go back to where they came from and get a sponsor. And I always tell them, if your sponsor tell you something different than what I'm telling you, he's probably right. But this is all I got to give you right now. And, and every now and then I get a success letter back from those guys. You know, the 12 steps isn't designed to take away who we are. The 12 steps are designed to take away who we're not. I always knew there was a spiritual solution but I didn't know about the program of action. I remember my family used to get me sometime and take me to church. And the preacher would preach this big sermon, and he would do something called an altar call. And they would always budge me up there to get that altar call. And I would raise my hand, and you know what? And I would be feeling so guilty. I wanted what that guy had to offer. And they would anoint me with oil and all that stuff, and that guy would do that. And I leave church, and I couldn't pass the ABC to save my life. I'm not saying that God couldn't meet me at that altar. What I'm saying is that my house wasn't in order to receive the things of God. After working the 12 steps, it said, having had a spiritual awakening, that's what? The result of these steps. Guess what? ABC and no other whiskey store is a problem in my life anymore. The 12 steps have helped me in that area of my life. There was Michelangelo was in front of a church, and he was chiseling on this big ugly stone. And a little old lady came out and said, son, why are you chiseling on that big ugly stone? He said, because on the inside of this stone there stands a beautiful angel. When the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous take away everything that's ugly, here's a room full of beautiful angels. Where else can we get this deal from? You know, but there's a lie that centers the mind of every alcoholic, that he could one day safely drink again. And if we get away from doing the things that we're supposed to do in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, that lie comes alive. I got a bad bike. Some mornings I roll out of bed, I have to roll on my knees. And I always say a prayer. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou will. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those that I may help. Of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life, may I do thy will always. What I'm asking God is move John out of the way, God, so I can be a maximum service to you and others. See, in order for me to drink today, I'd have to drink off a lie. I couldn't drink off the truth to save my life. I could tell myself this and probably get good and drunk. You know, John, you're looking pretty good. And you got a wife. You got an automobile, your family bike on your team, and you work real hard. You deserve a beer. Now, I could probably drink off that, but I couldn't go sit down at a bar and say, John, when you open this beer, you're going to open the gates to the penitentiary. You're not going to have a wife because no woman's going to want you. You're not going to have an automobile because you're going to pawn it for drugs and alcohol. And there'll be more separation between you and your family than there ever been. And they'll probably put you deeper in prison than you ever been. That's the truth about me. That's what happened to a guy like me when he consumed alcohol. I've tried controlled drinking. It's that red look, I drink a little white. It's that white, I drink a little wine. The only way I can have a normal life is that I have to abandon alcohol. The ideal that I could safely drink has to be smashed. I thought I was weak until I made it to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and got a hold to the big book and read more about alcoholism. Bill said that most of us was unwilling to admit we was real alcoholics. And then Bill told us how we had to get this thing. He said we must conceive in our innermost self that we're alcoholics. And then he assured us that we can't drink again. He said we're like men that have lost their legs. Once losing their legs, they don't grow new ones. Once losing the ability to control our drinking, we don't regain it. And see, once I found out I had alcoholism, then you all could help me. You told me that I had to admit I was powerless over alcohol and my life was unmanageable. You told me that I had to come to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. You told me that my own concept was enough. And you told me that the realm of the spirit was broad and roomy, always inclusive, never exclusive. You told me that I had to make a decision to turn my life over to the will of God as I understand him. And that I had to get out of management. Because based on my management skills, if I worked for a big corporation, I would have been fired a long time ago. And that I had to learn to live along spiritual lines or I was going to die an alcoholic death. You told me that he was the principal and we were his agents. He's the father and we're his children. And you told me that that concept was the keystone to the new and triumph arch from which I could pass through to freedom. And then you made me a promise. You told me if I would stay close to God and perform his work well, that God would take care of me. See, I'm at a place in my recovery where either God is or he ain't. He's everything or he's nothing. See, I walk by faith and not by sight. I'd rather walk alone with God in the dark than any man in the light. You know, I've had some things to happen in my life out through my 15th year of sobriety. My 15th year of sobriety hasn't been pretty at all. Thank God for the day. I'm in the 16th year. I'm here at a conference, so things are looking promising. I started off my 15th year of sobriety with hepatitis C. I went to donate blood and found out that I had hepatitis C and my liver was at stage 2. And they told me, John, you need to get on this interferon. Everybody told me, John, that interferon gonna run you crazy. Then I had to make a decision. Was I gonna follow what people were saying, or was I gonna lay there and just let it finish eating my liver away? And I made the decision, with God, I can do this. And I went and I got on interferon. And I'm standing here tonight, and hepatitis C is undetected. My liver functions are normal. The month I got off of interferon, my oldest sister died to this disease. Last month, my youngest sister died to this disease. And I lost my job. I've started my own business since then, but I lost my job, and I made pretty good money at what I do. And nothing in my life looked promising. And I just saying, God, what is this? And I felt like the whole world, you know, I fought this hepatitis C. My sisters, I'm helping people in treatment centers, and then I'm watching my family die from this disease, and everything looked bad. And then, you know, the little material things begin to fade away. And then one day I seen on the internet where somebody had posted, we go through life and we get all these material things. And then we don't realize that God is all we need until God is all we have left. You hear me? And God has been more than enough. You know why I say God been more than enough? Because I'm standing here sober tonight after going through all of that. Our basic text said, for alcoholic failed to enlarge and perfect his spiritual life, he will not survive the certain low spots and trials ahead. I did the work. I'm still doing the work. You know what? Alcoholics Anonymous is the best thing that ever happened to me. If it had not been for the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and a loving God, I'll still be a deadbeat dad. I would still be a hopeless drunk. I would still be a crackhead. And my name would be 701967, black male, sir. But because of this fellowship and that power that's here, yeah, there is a power here. And I know that there's a power here because sometimes I'm in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I see young women come in, and they've been prostituting their bodies, and they've lost their kids, and they look all tore up. And in about 6 months, that same girl say, I'm getting weekend visits with my kids again. And about a year, she say, I got a job, I got an apartment, and my kids are back with me. And that guy that come out from under the bridge that nobody wanted to sit next to, he smelled so bad, 6 months to a year, that guy sitting there in a seat, and you don't even know it's the same guy. How did those two people get from there to where they're at? Only by the grace that we find in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know about y'all, but I am a happy customer for my money. I mean, I've got more than my dollar worth since I've been here. You know, when I first came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and I would say something crazy, y'all told me to keep coming back. Everywhere else I went, they told me not to come back. And if I showed up, they would ask who told him. You know, some of y'all went through life and y'all went to high school, and some of you graduated college, and you got your life started. And then you had a bump in the road and you came to Alcoholics Anonymous and you was able to get your life back. But I got news for you. Alcohol never cost me anything. Because of alcohol, I never got anything. Alcohol got a hold of me at the age of 14 and it ran a race with me. But today there's 3 things I'm proud about. I got a driver license, tag, and insurance. That might not sound like much to some people, but that's a big deal for a guy like me. You know, my family, sometimes, you know that my family, the same family that said I was doomed, the same family that said they didn't want me around, they argue about who house I'm coming to for holidays now. Isn't that something? And sometimes I'm at my family house on holidays and I catch them watching me. And I say, why are you watching me? He said, oh, it's nothing. I said, yeah, shut up, tell me why you watching me. He said, man, how did you do it? And a hero of mine, I heard him tell a story once, Joe McQuaney. And I tell him I'm just like that old woodpecker. And they say, well, how is the woodpecker? I said, there was a woodpecker that used to get up religiously every morning and go peck on a hardwood tree to try to get the worms and mites out. And one day, a dark cloud formed over that tree. And a streak of lightning came out that cloud and split that tree. And the woodpecker was able to eat all the worms and mites he wanted. And then here come a flock of woodpeckers and they joined him. And they began to eat too. And one of the woodpeckers looked up at him and said, how did you do it? And he told him, I showed up and did what I was supposed to do. And God did the rest. And that's my story. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Nice job, Rob. Outstanding. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Happy birthday.
We hope you've enjoyed this recording. To obtain additional copies, receive a free catalog of AA and Al-Anon talks, or to find out about our tape and CD of the Month Club, call Encore Audio Archives at 1-800-878-1308 or visit our website at www.12steptapes.com.
Welcome back to the Encore Audio YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. Well, tonight I've got some Joe and Charlie here. I found these cassette sets that I've had for some time, and I've already transferred them and digitized them to MP3s, and now I'm going to make MP4s and upload them. So let me know if you like Joe and Charlie. If you want to hear more, I have a few more sets in the back in the wings, and I want you to have a good day if you want to. Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've recorded meetings and conventions here in Southern California since 1998. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994, and I got sober in a small town called Santa Maria. I moved to Los Angeles when I had 5 years sober and started recording meetings shortly after I got here. In 2013, I started recording conventions. So please enjoy the channel. Please like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. Just click right down there. Thank you.